If you're anything like me, you played the Final Fantasy VII Remake and instantly wanted to replay the original game. Final Fantasy VII is over 20 years old by now, yet still one of the most beloved video games of all time, regardless of the fact that the story was super poorly translated into English and was honestly pretty difficult to follow regardless of that fact. Here, we hope to offer a quick summation of the Final Fantasy VII story for anyone who played it 2 decades ago and forgot what happened or never knew to begin with, highlighting the most important things to remember. Without further ado, here is a 40-hour video game in about 20 minutes. We open on the industrial city of Midgar with protagonist Cloud Strife, mercenary for hire, joining eco-terrorist group Avalanche on an assault against a reactor owned by the Shinra Electric Company, marking the first time eco-terrorism has ever seemed cool. Cloud is hired because he's a former member of the Shinra Elite Special Forces, known as Soldier, which means they're elite but not elite enough to have a better name than simply Soldier. On the mission to bomb the reactor, we meet Barrett Wallace, a man with a gun for an arm who's obsessed with stopping the Shinra Electric Company because they're draining the planet of its natural resources, here referred to as Mako. The game does a great job of dropping you instantly into action, making you sort of forget that you don't know anything about this world or anything that might have happened before Cloud jumped off that train. This is actually a super important plot point already, but subtle enough that it's easy to forget this fact as you play. Cloud's connection to Avalanche is his childhood friend Tifa Lockhart, who goes on the second bombing mission with the group. Shinra expects them, however, and sends a big robot to stop them. The group is separated, but Cloud in the process falls into a church and meets Aerith or Aerith Gainsborough. She's an innocent flower vendor who's being pursued by Shinra for reasons unclear. She also claims to carry with her a piece of materia, little orbs of condensed Mako energy that allow you to cast magic. But she claims her materia doesn't actually do anything. Remember this tiny plot point, this is when the real game begins. Along the way, Cloud occasionally has brief episodes of mental freakouts that he tries to brush off. They're very short right now, but keep an eye on them because these freakouts are the real bad guys in this game. Cloud and Aerith almost make their way back to Avalanche's hideout, but they're distracted by Tifa in a carriage being transported off to Wall Market, which is Midgar's version of Las Vegas. Tifa, being attractive, was trying to infiltrate the mansion of super perv Don Corneo in order to get info on what Shinra's up to. Cloud, being attractive but in a totally different way, cross-dresses to gain access as well, and they learn that Shinra is going to drop some of the city structure onto the slums that Avalanche calls home and blame the whole incident on Avalanche. Our heroes rush to stop this from happening, but they're too late. The slums are crushed, our heroes are despondent. To make matters worse, Aerith is captured by Shinra. The gang infiltrates Shinra HQ to find out why, discovering that she's the last of an ancient race of people known as, surprise, the Ancients. There's a legend that the Ancients knew of a promised land bursting with Mako energy, and they believe that she can lead the company there and they'll all be rich. Aerith is being experimented on by Shinra's lead scientist, Professor Hojo. Keep an eye on him, turns out he's the real bad guy. The gang also discovers 2 test subjects that Dr. Hojo keeps in his lab, the super smart wolf that Hojo has branded as Red 13, and the other is a headless body labeled as Genova that causes Cloud to have one of his weird mental episodes. Keep an eye on Genova, turns out she's actually the real bad guy. Red 13 helps the gang escape, but they all discover a weird trail of blood everywhere. Genova's holding tank is now empty, and there are slaughtered Shinra employees everywhere, and even President Shinra himself is found impaled on a huge sword, but not the huge sword that Cloud begins the game with. It's the huge sword of a man named Sephiroth, the greatest soldier of all time who everyone thought died 5 years ago. He's apparently alive and he's taken Genova with him, killing everyone in his way. Rufus Shinra, son of the president, arrives to take over the company. Keep an eye on him. Actually, I'm just kidding. Rufus Shinra turns out is almost meaningless to the overall story. The gang escapes from Midgar as Cloud tells them that it's super important that they forget Shinra for now and pursue Sephiroth because you guessed it, turns out he's actually the real bad guy. Cloud uses this chance to flash back to 5 years ago when he was in Soldier and on a mission with Sephiroth in his and Tifa's hometown of Nibelheim. Their local Mako reactor was being hounded by monsters and they had to investigate. Tifa guides the team through the mountains to the reactor where they discover Hojo is experimenting on humans by infusing them with Mako. Sephiroth finds this to be in poor taste until he discovers that the weird creature Genova is being held here at the reactor. He has a strong reaction to seeing her, saying that Martha was also his mother's name. Genova was also his mother's name. Sephiroth goes to a laboratory in a mansion in the city that is owned by Shinra to look through the medical journals of Shinra scientists Dr. Gast and Professor Hojo. These journals all say that Genova was an ancient whose preserved body had been found frozen in a glacier up north. The 2 scientists experimented with her cells, ran human experiments, and Sephiroth believes himself to be one of those experiments. Sephiroth decides that this makes him an ancient and that Shinra needs to pay for what they did to his weird headless mom. Saying that the planet really belongs to him, he goes insane, vows revenge, and casually burns Nibelheim to the ground. Cloud ends his flashback very suddenly, not remembering what happened next. Tifa seems super bothered by everything he just said, but she doesn't say that he's wrong. The game doesn't do a very good job of conveying here that she's very bothered by it, but it's important that she is bothered by it, remember this. because now the game really begins. They travel to Shinra military dock town Junon to sneak on board a boat headed across the ocean in pursuit of Sephiroth. Once on board, Sephiroth appears, and in the immortal words of video game designer and reviewer Tim Rogers, throws his mother at them to start a fight. The gang fights against Jenova, or at least a monster made from the parts of her body. Once they reach the other continent, Cloud takes his friends to Disney World, aka the Gold Saucer. Here they meet the character of Kate Sith, a horrible Chuck E. Cheese animatronic who tells fortunes and forces his way into their friend group to see how the fortunes turn out. Keep an eye on him, turns out he's the real bad guy. Further along this path of backstory exposition, they reach Red 13's hometown of Cosmo Canyon, where his real name of Nanaki is revealed, but that's not important. They meet his creepy floating grandfather, who explains that the planet they live on is fueled by the Circle of Life, or as they call it in this game, the Life Stream. When something dies, it rejoins the planet in the Life Stream and fuels some other form of life elsewhere. This Life Stream is what Shinra calls Mako, so when they mine it from the planet, they're killing the planet. The Ancients, also known as the Cetra, are in tune with the Life Stream and can hear and understand the cries of the planet. Aerith, therefore, knows why she feels like the planet is in danger, why Sephiroth is such a big threat, and determines that there's no way he's actually an Ancient as he claims. This is important. As the party ventures further west in pursuit of Sephiroth, they come across Cloud and Tifa's hometown of Nibelheim, which is somehow totally fine and intact and not the heap of ash that Cloud and Tifa remember. As you would expect, this freaks them out a bit. What doesn't freak them out for some reason is that the town is populated by a bunch of weird guys in black cloaks who are obsessed with meeting up with Sephiroth for some kind of reunion. The old Shinra mansion is still here, so the friends wander to the basement and meet up with Sephiroth again. He asks if Cloud is coming to the reunion, then escapes, inviting them to keep following him. So they do! As a side note, there's a totally optional character that they can recruit at this point in the game named Vincent. The only reason he's worth mentioning right now is because he's a former Shinra operative who knows Sephiroth's real mother, a woman named Lucretia. This is important because it shows that we don't actually know who or what Jenova is. After crossing the mountains, they meet and recruit a former Shinra pilot named Sid Highwind, who doesn't really have a massive plot impact but cusses a lot and is the coolest character in the game, don't at me. Shinra executives arrive to steal Sid's plane so they can go to something called the Temple of the Ancients, where they have determined that Sephiroth is going. Instead, Cloud and company take the plane for themselves, and now the game really begins. In order to access the Temple of the Ancients and find out why Sephiroth is doing what he's doing, the gang has to find a keystone that will open up the gate for them. The Walt Disney of Final Fantasy VII, a naked man named Dio who owns the Gold Saucer, also owns the keystone and offers it to Cloud if Cloud agrees to dance for his enjoyment. In the middle of the night, however, Kate Sith, that useless hunk of junk, takes the keystone and hands it over to Shinra. He betrays the group, claims to feel bad about it, but then also lets them know that he's holding Barrett's daughter hostage so that they will keep him in their friend group. He's a really cool dude. Leaving the Gold Saucer, they arrive at the Temple of the Ancients and find that Shinra has opened things up, but Sephiroth arrived and wiped everyone out. Murals on the walls of the temple reveal Sephiroth's history and plan. Thousands of years ago, the planet was struck by an evil magic known as Meteor. The planet had gathered as much of the life stream as it could at the point of impact in order to heal the wound. The magic that was used to summon this meteor was sealed away by the Cetra in something called the Black Materia and hidden away in the temple. Sephiroth wants the materia to summon another massive meteor, wound the planet once again, and then absorb the life stream energy that gathers into himself to become so powerful that he will rule the world. The Cetra, in order to protect the Black Materia from ever being found, actually made it into the temple itself. In order for the temple to turn back into materia, you have to solve puzzles inside the temple, which will cause it to shrink with you inside, making it impossible for you to actually get the materia. This is why Sephiroth had so many of his cronies in black cloaks looking for the materia for him. The traitorous Kate Sith offers to stay inside the temple as it shrinks so that Cloud can be outside and get the materia. Here, almost immediately after he betrayed the group and held a young girl hostage, the game tries to make us feel sad that the horrible Chuck E. Cheese is dying. This is the last we will ever mention of him. Cloud gathers the black materia, and the group is able to keep it away from Sephiroth's cult followers. The end. Oh wait, no, Sephiroth shows up, and turns out that Cloud's mental episodes he's been having are Sephiroth's attempts to control his mind. Sephiroth forces Cloud to hand him the materia and attack his group, and then Kate Sith arrives and ruins yet another scene in the game. When he comes to, Cloud is distraught. He can't understand why he followed Sephiroth's orders. He knows he can't keep pursuing the man, yet for some reason he also feels compelled to keep pursuing the man. This is important. Meanwhile, Aerith has left the group, telling Cloud in a dream that she must go to the hidden city of the Ancients, near the crater formed by Meteor thousands of years ago. The group tracks her down to the city and find her silently in prayer. As Cloud approaches her, he starts to have a mental episode once again. He draws his sword and is about to kill Aerith, stopping at just the last second. Whew, close call. after the most devastating moment in a series of devastating moments, the group attempts to attack Sephiroth, who mocks Cloud for thinking that he has feelings. Sephiroth then pulls the classic move of turning into his mother, Jenova, and they fight. The game doesn't necessarily explain here who Jenova actually is, but we're going to do it in the video for the sake of clarity. When Meteor hit thousands of years ago, the Cetra gathered around the crater in order to help the planet heal. However, a strange alien creature also arrived at the planet in the meteor and infected the ancients with its cells, turning them into monsters that it could control. This shape-shifting calamity from the skies, as the ancients called it, was eventually renamed Jenova when Shinra found it and started experimenting with it by injecting its cells into humans, such as Sephiroth and, as it turns out, all of those guys in black cloaks. So when the crew has tried to fight Sephiroth on the boat, and now they've actually been fighting Jenova, who shapeshifted to look like Sephiroth. Our heroes have to say goodbye to Aerith and continue north to the crater, intent on getting revenge. Cloud is now on the verge of totally losing it, and he's really super nervous about the fact that Sephiroth keeps playing him like a fool. However, he foolishly continues in pursuit, passing through the town of Icicle Inn and finding the weirdly perfectly preserved house of former Shinra scientist Dr. Gast, and a neat lady named Ilfana. Old home movies show that Ilfana was actually the real last ancient, unlike the body of Jenova that Gast had found at the crater. And Ilfana fills Gast in on what sort of monster Jenova really is. Videos also reveal that the two fell in love and had a child, named her Aerith or whatever, and Shinra, led by Professor Hojo, show up, shoot Gast, and try to kidnap Ilfana and the child. The two ancients escape, however, apparently to Midgar, where Ilfana dies and the child is adopted by a lonely lady at a train station. Ilfana also hints in these videos at a self-defense mechanism that the planet created for itself, a weapon with the very on-the-nose name of Weapon. More on that later. Moving further north, Cloud and the gang find the crater of Meteor's impact and head inside. President Rufus Shinra arrives, thinking he's finally cornered Sephiroth. They do another battle against a ship-shifting Jenova creature and reclaim the black materia. Cloud hands the black materia to somebody else in the party because he can't be trusted with it. Leaving that party member and the black materia safely behind, Cloud and Tifa continue their pursuit of the real Sephiroth buried in the crater. As they advance, they see visions of a burning Nibelheim. Cloud and Tifa try to remain calm about the vision, but it's different than how Cloud remembered it when he recounted it in his flashbacks to the rest of the group. There's a different man standing in the place of Cloud. Cloud tries to brush it off as nothing, but Tifa is super concerned about what she's seeing. See, all this time, Tifa had known that there was something wrong with what Cloud had recounted to the group. While all the details seem to be correct, it was not Cloud who was there that day, and Tifa had no idea how he knew all this information. Tifa didn't want to say anything to him because while she is a strong-willed and a tough fighter, she's surprisingly timid and conflicted about being upfront with people. Honesty is not her strength. She can't find it within herself to confront Cloud on these memories, and she can't find it within herself to tell Cloud how she feels about him because she's afraid of what will happen if she does either one of those things. This internal conflict makes her a very interesting and an in-depth character, and one of the more interesting storylines in the entire game of Final Fantasy VII, but we never really give her proper credit for that because the game developers decided to turn her into a pinup girl. As the visions continue and Tifa is more and more unsettled, Cloud himself starts to have doubt. Sephiroth tells him that he is not real and that he never was there 5 years ago. He claims that Cloud is a puppet, created as an experiment of Hojo's, which took his identity from Tifa's memories and serves only one purpose: bringing the black materia to Sephiroth. Tifa can't really say anything to the contrary, and Cloud's mental state shatters. Turns out, Cloud was the real bad guy. Another trick from Sephiroth brings the party member with the black materia to reunite with Cloud and Tifa. Against Tifa's wishes, a very calm Cloud takes the black materia and apologizes to everyone. He tells Tifa that he's very sorry he could not be the real Cloud, and he hopes that she finds him someday, fully admitting that he is nothing more than a Hojo attempt to clone Sephiroth using Jenova cells. In a totally normal manner, he flies upside down towards a cocoon where the real Sephiroth is preserved inside. Sephiroth did actually die 5 years ago, but being part Jenova and part super soldier, he was not absorbed into the lifestream like most dead things should be. Instead, he drifted through it towards the crater where the lifestream was the strongest. More on all of this in a bit though. As everything has been going wrong, it now goes even more wrong than it ever did before. Cloud gives the Sephiroth cocoon the black materia, and the planet panics. The weapons that the planet made as a self-defense mechanism against Jenova thousands of years ago wake up, and Cloud's friends barely escape on board the Shinra airship. Cloud and the Sephiroth cocoon, however, fall inside the Earth and are lost. Tifa is unconscious for 7 days. She dreams about the fact that Nibelheim did in fact burn 5 years ago, exactly as Cloud described, but she admits he wasn't there, and she has no idea how he knows these things. They reunited in Midgar, and he says it's been 5 years since we saw each other, when in reality it had been 7 years. Confused by his sudden appearance and the weird lapses in his memory, Tifa convinces him to stick around and help Avalanche so that she can figure out what exactly is going on with him. This is why it's really important that the game opened up the way it did, with Cloud on a mission and no context as to why he was there, because we don't have any context as to why he was there. And now the real game begins. Tifa, Barret, and the boys are back at the harbor city of Junon, where Shinra has decided to publicly execute them as scapegoats. This thereby proves that Shinra only ever has two strategies in life: make terrible reactors that always fail, and blame Avalanche for everything. Meteor hangs in the sky, and one of the weapons, unable to find Sephiroth hidden away in the crater, attacks Junon. The crew uses this opportunity to steal the Shinra airship known as the Highwind, and now the game really begins. You know what, I'm done with that joke. The search for Cloud brings them back to the crater, but a barrier has formed that won't let them in. However, if they believe that Cloud fell into the lifestream when the weapons woke up, then they have to find a spot on the planet where the lifestream has bubbled up to the surface. There is one that they know of, a city named Mideel, and conveniently enough, Cloud is there. The only issue here is that Cloud is unresponsive. Tifa hangs back to take care of him, and the rest of the crew goes off on an adventure to get some huge materia that Shinra wants to weaponize, and that is honestly not really the biggest plot point. We won't really dive into that. While Tifa's looking after Cloud, another weapon attacks Mideel, and they both fall into the lifestream. Tifa wakes up in a weird fragmented projection of Cloud's consciousness. Here, she sees some of his old memories, such as the burning of Nibelheim 5 years ago, but this time around she is bold enough to correct him. No, he wasn't there. It was another soldier who accompanied Sephiroth, a guy named Zack, who happened to be Aerith's boyfriend. Other memories show Cloud as a child who's a neighbor to Tifa and always wanted to get Tifa's attention, but never really could. Cloud, desperate to get Tifa to notice him, vows that he will grow up, join Soldier, and become as powerful as Sephiroth. Then he could come back and protect her in her time of need. The problem is, he failed to even make it into Soldier and became a lonely grunt in the Shinra army instead. However, Cloud's memory wasn't totally wrong. He was actually there when Nibelheim burned 5 years ago, but he was not a soldier, he was one of the anonymous masked guards. Being too afraid to admit his failure, he never removed his mask, and Tifa had no idea that it was him. The memories now show us that when Sephiroth went crazy, Cloud charged after him into the reactor. He watched Sephiroth attack both Tifa and Zack, then snuck up behind Sephiroth when he wasn't looking and killed him, throwing him into the Mako that was in the reactor. This is probably the coolest moment in the entire game, when an enraged failure totally manhandles the big bad. Plus, it shows that without either of them actually remembering, Cloud had kept his promise to save Tifa if she was ever in trouble. This is how Sephiroth ended up in the livestream, never really becoming one with it, retaining his own consciousness, but trying to absorb its power. As he absorbed knowledge from the livestream, he took over the powers of Jenova. So this Sephiroth or Jenova that we actually do see is really Sephiroth with the knowledge of the livestream, but with Jenova's powers of shapeshifting and mind control. So as it turns out, he's really all the bad guys kind of rolled into one. Even though Cloud successfully tossed Sephiroth into the livestream, he suffered massive wounds and passed out. Tifa is saved from the village, but all the other survivors of the Nibelheim incident are gathered up by Shinra and injected with the Jenova cells as an experiment, including Cloud and, as it turns out, Zack. This creates the men in black cloaks and explains why Cloud was able to be mind controlled by Sephiroth. In the game, if you go back to the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim after you see all of this, there's a separate hidden cutscene. The cutscene shows Cloud and Zack being held captive in the mansion basement for years after the Nibelheim incident. Zack breaks free, rescues a brain-dead Cloud, and dresses him in an old soldier uniform. The two head towards Midgar, with Cloud still in a catatonic state, but when they arrive, they're greeted by Shinra guards who gun Zack down. Cloud comes to, unaware of what's happened, and claims Zack's sword. He enters the city, where a lonely Tifa finds him at a train station. The mere sight of her snaps him out of his condition and causes him to assume Zack's identity to fill in the gaps in his own memory. Anyway, Zack is dead, and his body is somewhere outside of Midgar, and no one really seems to care or notice. Cloud now, having regained his correct identity and realizing that he's not actually a creation of Hojo, but he is a real boy, now regains the party as they gather the rest of the aptly named huge materia. Needing a place to hide the materia, they take it to Cosmo Canyon for safekeeping with Red 13's creepy floating Yoda-esque grandpa. Grandpa tells them that he thinks he can figure out what Aerith's plan for stopping Meteor was, but that they need to take him to the City of the Ancients where she was murdered, because that for sure won't cause any PTSD for anyone. Floating Grandpa explains that the Cetra had an ultimate holy or white magic that could counteract the Meteor or black magic. They had passed that materia down from generation to generation. This is the materia that Aerith had carried with her that she thought didn't do anything. This holy magic could only be summoned by somebody who would go into the life stream to search for holy. Aerith had actually started to cast this holy magic before she was murdered, a fate that she knew lay ahead for her. Holy will destroy Meteor, but holy will also wipe out anything that is bad to the planet, which might include people. So, pick your poison type of thing. Sephiroth's body, buried in the life stream, is actively trying to stop Holy from being released. Therefore, the mission is clear. The group must enter the planet through the crater and destroy Sephiroth's body so that Holy can be released and stop Meteor. However, the barrier over the crater protecting Sephiroth still stands. Conveniently enough, though, President Rufus Shinra has a giant cannon at Midgar and fires a blast at the barrier that erases it from existence. Our heroes can now enter the crater and take down Sephiroth, but first the game gives you an opportunity to wrap up all of that Shinra nonsense from the beginning of the game and return to Midgar and basically kill everyone who was ever associated with the company. Crazy Professor Hojo is overpowering the cannon at Midgar, planning to fire a shot to the crater to give more power to Sephiroth, who he reveals to be his son. That's right, Hojo is Sephiroth's dad, who may have impregnated the scientist Lucretia, the mother, through questionable circumstances, and at this point turns out to maybe have been actually the real bad guy all along. Either way, the group kills the bejesus out of him. Cloud and the gang now descend on the crater, passing by Holy, which is trapped by Sephiroth's power. When they reach Sephiroth, he appears as the deity he always believed himself to be, and the group does battle with him. After defeating him, though, uncertainty hits, as nothing really seems to have changed. Holy is not escaping, and Cloud senses that Sephiroth is still around. The tie between the two of them causes Cloud's consciousness to drift into the livestream to confront Sephiroth's consciousness once and for all. Cloud promptly kills the bejesus out of him. Now free from Sephiroth, Holy begins to release itself, and the crater begins to collapse. Our heroes escape on the high wind to watch Meteor crashing down towards Midgar. Sephiroth may finally be gone, but his efforts to delay Holy seem to have succeeded. It looks like Holy is powerless to stop Meteor, but at the last second, the life stream bursts forth from the ground to join in on the battle. As all of the forces collide, we see a glimpse of the spirit of Aerith, willing the life stream to help Holy repel Meteor. Cut to black. 500 years later, we see Red 13 running with his children through a canyon. Every friend he's ever had has died. He's seen countless loved ones pass through this mortal realm and join into the life stream and become one with the planet. At the top of the canyon wall, he releases a mournful wail as we see a shot of the ruins of Midgar, engulfed in renewed plant life. Nature has returned to an area in which it had died. Human civilization has been destroyed. As it turns out, Aerith and the planet were the real bad guys all along.